Welcome to another episode of Tolly on Technology. Our topic today, 5G. Specifically, we'll discuss how communication service providers, CSPs, are partnering with cloud compute providers to deliver new services to market that require ultra low latency. Services like telehealth, connected cars, cloud gaming, and so on. It is no exaggeration to state that leveraging 5G could have far-reaching beneficial effects for enterprise networking. I'm Kevin Tolly, founder of the Tolly Group, and I am joined today by Ken Rosenberg, who is the Director of Product Management for Umetrix User Experience Solutions at Spirent Communications. Ken, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
For years, those of us involved in enterprise networks have generally considered cellular-based communication as a secondary link. It seems like 5G changes all that and opens up new opportunities as well as presents some challenges. So 5G plus cloud compute is news to many of us. So I'm hoping that you can start off today with a brief level set to let our viewers understand what type of 5G plus cloud compute solutions they should expect to see in 2022. Perhaps you can give us a little more info about an application such as mobile gaming that can benefit from 5G plus cloud compute. Ken?
Thanks so much for inviting me on your program today, Kevin. I really appreciate it. Yeah, let me quickly do some level set for you as you mentioned. So there's three main use cases driving the deployment phase for 5G, and I just wanted to briefly touch on that for your viewership. So we're really in the enhanced mobile broadband phase, the one on the right. Applications like immersive video, AR, VR, 3D video, and eventually sort of mobile gaming. That's going to be quickly followed in the next couple years by ultra reliable low latency communication to enable smart factories, autonomous vehicles, and edge computing applications. And then the last one really is MMTC. This is massive machine type communication. So think smart cities, smart logistics, smart metering type of applications. So if you think about 5G and where we are in the life cycle and the journey, we're really at its infancy. So the promise of 5G is typically measured by two principal KPIs that the industry is tracking. It's speed on the downlink or download speeds, and then latency. The promise of 5G is really deliver 10 gigabit peak speeds, average user experience between 100 and a gig on a consistent basis, and really latency between under 10 milliseconds. And you can see in that column on the right, we're just not there yet. We're kind of in the infancy of the deployment phase.
So is there a time frame, just not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but when this promise will be realized? Or is that a year out? Is that 5 years out?
Yeah, I mean, the whole journey is going to take probably the next 10 years to get to, some of these new immersive contents. We're talking in the next 5 years, really, to see some of those new use cases and new solutions for these enterprises be enabled.
So almost by definition, these types of applications are mission critical, right? Certainly looking at real-time activities that you had mentioned in your previous slide. So in a 5G plus cloud compute scenario, though, enterprise managers no longer have direct control over either the network infrastructure or the compute infrastructure. So what kind of challenges does this present? So how are enterprise managers able to deal with, let's say, SLAs and other assurances in this kind of environment?
It's a great question. So, what we're seeing happening right now is that, the CSPs are partnering with a lot of these cloud compute providers. Think, AWS, think Azure, think Google Cloud, think IBM, to deliver these exciting new services that require the ultra low latency for these new enterprises. So some of those challenges are, how can they measure, how can these CSPs and the cloud compute providers understand whether or not the network is ready to be offered to these new enterprises, whether or not they're fit for purpose. Once the network is enhanced and then the initial services are made available to the enterprises, how can you continually optimize that user experience? to achieve the consistent operating performance. There's really a lot more at stake now because it's not just the CSPs and the cloud compute providers. There's end customers now, these private enterprises that are subscribers to the system. So that's, the second challenge. The third one is if there are problems identified through proactive measurements, or gosh forbid, through a subscriber base, how can these enterprises and their carrier service provider hosts identify where they are quickly? Those are the three primary challenges.
Okay, can we dig into a little more detail on some of those, or how are people going to deal with all those?
In order to come up with solutions for these challenges, the solutions, you need to be able to benchmark and qualify the user experience of these new services from an end-to-end perspective. So let's take cloud gaming, mobile gaming as an example. What's the experience of an actual user playing a multiplayer game on these latest networks? Do you have to use real users? Can you automate that with test and measurement solutions? Or can you measure them through actual services being delivered through a managed service to qualify that user experience? That's one thing I'd be looking for in the solutions portfolio. And it's important to recognize that the act of measuring the user experience can't just be a one and done event. I mean, sure, it's important to do it at the early deployment phase of the network, but it's even more important to do it on a 24/7 monitoring framework.
So for SLA purposes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's basically because you've got to make sure that it's good in different regions, different times of day, not just, like you said, one and done. It was okay at this time, I guess it's okay forever.
Right. If I'm Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile, I'm going to be wanting to monitor that on a consistent basis because I'm going to have new enterprises on my network. And I need to proactively do that. And so the last one is it can't just be about capturing the user experience. What we consistently hear from the market at Spirent is it's important to capture, speed and latency, as I said, as the two big litmus tests for 5G, but you've got to be able to quickly segment out issues in the network. And so you need to be able to quickly tap into all aspects of the network, not just the radio access network that's closest to the subscriber, but all the other elements like the core network and aspects that the entire segmentation of the network.
Good. All right. So I mean, one fundamental difference I see that you're mentioning already is when we own the hardware, put the hardware up, we might put a switch, a router, or something up on a test bed. We'd run a set of tests. We would get our throughput, our latency, or whatever. We'd say, okay, it's always going to be that way, and we'd be done with our testing. But these types of networks just inherently, fundamentally are different, that the test harness, the test environment, the test solution really needs to be in place pretty much all the time, is what it sounds like to me.
It does. And like I said, it's going to become even more critical when these new enterprises are direct clients of the solution. I mean, really, in order for the CSPs to make back their investments in the technology, they're going to be wanting to monetize that to lots of different enterprises for specific applications. And it's really even more mission critical, like you said earlier on, to be able to monitor that on a consistent basis for all the enterprises riding on the networks.
Good. All right, we're going to dig into some details there. And
so I'm happy to talk a little bit about how Spirent can help. So Spirent helps in the entire entire life cycle of the customer's 5G journey, from lab validation to the live portfolio. I mean, near and dear to my heart is the live portfolio. That's part of lifecycle service assurance. My products in particular, the Umetrix portfolio, focused on user experience testing for device and service readiness and benchmarking. We measure voice, data, video services, primarily on the application layer, and then we do kind of deep dive drilling into the network. And then lastly, we have a whole other practice within the live portfolio that's focused on service assurance, end-to-end assurance, on a 24/7 monitoring basis.
Yeah.
My next slide speaks a little bit to the specific low latency edge application that was the subject of our discussion today. And so here you see, different, clouds, if you will, of the logical portions of a 5G network. I didn't put these green circles everywhere here, but Spirent can measure and has test agents that can measure, all these different test endpoints in the network. But I placed them strategically here in this slide so that you can see where the focus is on 5G low latency edge applications.
Yep.
So in particular, there's a green circle here at the far left for the radio access network that we're monitoring on a consistent basis, either through vehicular testing, stationary testing, or 24/7 monitoring testing. And then these other test agents are in these edge zones. And so Verizon is really leading the charge here with their partnership with AWS, where customers can go out and acquire AWS assets directly in Verizon's network and place test agents directly at the mobile edge. And we've sort of done that here as an example. And we can, on that lower right-hand chart, you see real data that was collected earlier this summer for latency to the 5G edge zone. That's the dark blue one that you see at the low, that's 60 milliseconds, like we talked about before on average.
Right.
And then out to the public cloud, averaging, just under 100. So you can see where the disparity is. Yeah. And if the industry is going to get to the vision of delivering against, these new exciting new offerings, we're really going to need to see those latencies drop down, to sub 20 milliseconds. So clearly we're not there yet, but we're in the process of measuring all of this on behalf of our customers.
Okay, good. Now, all of this is under the Umetrix umbrella at Spirent, or are there multiple products involved?
There's multiple different products involved in this particular slide. Okay. In the Umetrix side, we typically work with RAN testing, particularly focused on RAN testing out to the mobile edge and to the public internet. And for our test and methodology and best practices, it's important for us to test to managed 10 gigabit or 25 gigabit links that Spirent owns and maintains on behalf of our customers. And what's exciting now is we can deploy these, what we call media servers, out to the mobile edge to help with those qualifications and benchmarking capabilities to the public cloud, public internet, and to the mobile edge. And so as part of the 5G methodology, we're measuring connection rate, latency, throughput, and mobility in stationary scenarios. And we're also running typical subscriber tests to emulate the mobile gaming experience, not just fill the pipe bandwidth test, because it's important to test the underlying protocols that the services are riding on. So UDP, you're aware that that's a transport protocol that's typically used for streaming media. For a lot of the mobile gaming applications, it's going to be a lot of real-time telemetry going back and forth over HTTP, a bit of Go, the quick protocol that's running over UDP. So all these different protocols, when the packets flow through the networks, there's lots of different routing differences. So you need to be able to qualify all of them when you're testing. The last thing really is, in terms of the best practices, is you've got to be able to have a chipset logging tool to analyze these latest 3GPP signalings to help you and help the customers understand why the behavior is what it is. Not just the user experience, but helping to triage what the behavior really is and why it's happening.
So I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but if I'm a Spirent customer, if we can jump back to the previous slide, am I buying this as a service through Spirent? I'm not sure what the deployment model is. In the old days, if I'm benchmarking a product, I buy my Spirent tester, I own it, I set it up, I run it. But with these things, these are services. You mentioned about links that are there on behalf of the customer. I'm just not clear on what the whole deployment, if I'm your customer, how I'm receiving this service from you.
Sure, great question. So we sell both product and services here within this portfolio. So Umetrix products, that's a traditional model in and of itself. You can buy the products, the customers buy the products. We set them up for you on these managed links that Spirent hosts on the customer's behalf. So that's one model. Or you can just, you have a research question, you want to do some benchmarking, you can contract Spirent out to run those studies on your behalf.
Okay.
And, the Spirent service team uses these same products to deliver the service. So
Okay.
we have a number of different selling models.
Excellent. Okay, good. And if I want to find out more about it, looked like you had a slide there for us on that one.
Yeah. So here's some resources. I mean, the two at the top, I'll draw your attention to them. Over the last couple of years, Spirent has done sort of a state of 5G. We have Steve Douglas, who heads up our 5G practice here at Spirent. He does a tremendous job speaking to the industry as a whole. And what we've done is we've, over the last 2 years, we've used Steve and his team, and of course our marketing team, to put together kind of like a state of the union, if you will, on the state of 5G. And there's a couple reports there that your listenership and viewership can access to just really see what's happening at 5G from a high level perspective and how Spirent plays a part in that. We've done webinars like what we're doing today for insights into some of the 5G testing from the real world. And obviously we have blogs and brochures and data sheets on these Umetrix products that I manage on, for Spirent in terms of the Umetrix portfolio.
Any other final words or other comments that you'd like to make, or did we pretty much cover everything that you wanted to mention today?
I think I've covered it, and I just really wanted to thank you again so much for inviting me on your program today. And it's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Sure, our pleasure. Yeah, thanks, Ken, for your insights today. And everyone, thanks for joining us, and check back soon for another episode of Tolly on Technology.